How are you all? Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world. My name is Patrice Tsague. This is the E-Community Podcast, Nehemiah Week 2022 Recap. I'm here with Susan Schramm, my co-host on the E-Community, the Nehemiah Week. Susan, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. So before we kind of do a recap, just want to remind you guys. So this week is Nehemiah Week, an entire week dedicated to this whole idea of building kingdom companies. We've been getting together from all over the world. You can still join in if you're not yet signed up. If you're not yet joined in, you want to go to nehemiahweek.com, nehemiahweek.com. You can register and join us tomorrow because tomorrow we're going to have some great activity. And Bailey will be joining us tomorrow. We're going to Chuck Prophet. We're going to have a number of other speakers, Scott Reiser. We're going to have Pastor Moore. We're bringing the message. We're going to have some networking sessions, some breakout sessions. And then Thursday, we'll have an investors forum. And then we're going to have a breakout session for men and one for women. And then on Friday, we'll have an international business plan competition. Cumulate on Saturday with our state of the ministry event with my good friend, David Benham. Well, we're going to do a recap for you today. Those of you who can make it today, we're going to do a quick recap to give you a sense of what you missed and to help you to glean from what we happened today. Hopefully, you can join us tomorrow. Susan, what was uniquely distinct from you day one versus day two? Two different kind of days.
True, because yesterday we buzzed around the world visiting individual businesses. So there were a lot of the stories of businesses who had really, in many ways, achieved operational excellence and were living out adapting. Today's discussion was a lot about the how-tos of how is it, we pulled the thread a little bit about, so behind the curtain, how do you lead a business of operational excellence and how do you actually adapt and what kind of mindset and priorities do you need to execute that? So it's a little bit more of a teaching day today.
Yeah, it was. We get a wonderful worship from Kenya. And then Pastor Noela did a great job of laying a framework. He told us today that change is here, change is inevitable. And if we don't figure out how to embrace change, we might, our calling may be hindered, our purpose may be hindered. And he said, don't let that happen.
What's interesting? I can remember, 2 years ago, we started doing all this Nehemiah Week virtually, and we were all in crisis. I mean, everybody just felt slammed, right? What's happening? And a lot of those biblical verses in those days were very calming and comforting. What was, I thought, interesting today was that Pastor Noela sort of forced us to say, hey, guys, it's going to keep coming this way. Like, this is not like that was a crisis and now we have change. Change is the constant. And so as we build businesses, there's a tendency to think when you build as an entrepreneur, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this business built and then I'm going to have a business. But and then it's going to just work. And so this idea of operational excellence and requiring this continual changing was just really brought home with all the biblical background. And then he said the last thing he said was, and you got to build a team to do it. So if there's ever a great example of one, the fact that it's not just your own team, but having a community around you, that was really brought home by his speech.
Amen. Well, Clement from Ghana, good to see you. I think that's Joan from right here in US of A. Joan Randalls, by the way, congratulations, Joan, on your
award
on winning
yesterday.
the More Than a Conqueror of the Year award. Joan, tell us how the conference was for you today. I know that you were part yesterday and today. Just tell us how that was for you. We have also Victor from Haiti joining us today as well. And then, so after Pastor Noela, I kind of gave a framework to operational excellence. And in the definition, there were two words that we kind of built upon, this idea of rhythm and this idea adaptability, right? So the idea that it's about finding that rhythm that enable you to be able to adapt no matter what's going on outside of you. We use the analogy or the example of the of an earthquake and how these modern day buildings are built to be agile and adaptable in midst of an earthquake. What are your thoughts?
that was a really helpful analogy, I think, because a building looks, if you go to Singapore or you go to California, these buildings look permanent. They look like huge structures. But then when you learn the technology they put behind them, they have, right, as you say, they've built anticipating continual change. And I think the other thing that works for an earthquake is that point that an earthquake isn't a one-shot thing. An earthquake has aftershocks, right? So I thought it was a really great example. So when you defined operational excellence, you're really talking about all these different elements of thinking through excellence as a goal, as a pursuit, not a
Mm.
one-shot wonder. The idea that excellence holds us to a bar that's not simply what we do in our business, but how we live our lives. I thought it was very powerful way to sort of frame the whole concept of operational excellence that we're trying to talk about. And then you jumped into sort of the framework for how to adapt. I thought those three levels were interesting. Can you frame that?
Yeah, about this idea of starting with best practice, but then understanding biblical principles, the redemptive framework to it, and then understanding the power of the Holy Spirit, and kind of challenging the listeners and the audience to say, hey, throughout the week, you're going to hear some best practice, which I think you and our good friend Andy gave some great guest practice, including even John. And then you guys also mentioned some biblical principles. You guys quoted various scriptures and gave kind of the guardrails as to how to look at it redemptively. And then the power of the Holy Spirit. And nobody did that even better than Serene when she really talked about that whole idea of knowing that we made in God's image and likeness. Now, with that, you then went into the adaptive advantage. And I like how you put it. To be honest, I've never heard of adapt being looked at as an advantage the way you really put it. But you kind of have coined a new concept here that you can write a book around, Susan.
Okay,
This
let's hear
whole
it.
idea, and it's kind of a spin-off from the risk, right? If you think about it, your thing is about the risking. Well, so in a sense, if we're going to be effective in de-risking, you've got to be able to own this idea of being adaptable. Any connection there? Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. In fact, my research had, when I work with CEOs and boards trying to help organizations shift strategies, and so a lot of my learnings is that people need to talk openly about risk. But what was really evident is over time, what they became fascinated with, what makes some organizations be able to shift and move forward with that strategy, and which ones seem to get stuck. And a lot of it had to do with this muscle, this skill set of adapting. And then I started realizing and actually doing more research into this subject of an adaptive advantage. And as Boston Consulting Group had said, you it's interesting. A lot of organizations in the last few years have really demonstrated they didn't have a plan for how they were going to continue to adapt. They really didn't. And so getting good at that will actually differentiate you in the marketplace. Um, and there, I talked about several steps you can take today. This isn't rocket science. One, make sure your purpose and vision is clear. Which, of course, as believers, we have a lot more sort of confidence in the purpose of why we're here. But that affects your organization as well, so people know when things are changing, how do you shift? And then you build a flexible foundation, and the flexible foundation affects not only the tools you use, the IT tools, but it's the way you organize your groups. It's how you give responsibility to people, how you train people. So the foundation is really a fluid way of helping people understand that as they adapt, that's part of their jobs and setting them up for success there. And then I talked about a what if rhythm, which is very much one of my elements of de-risk system, is to talk frequently about what if, make that a proactive conversation. And I appreciated that John Chongo later said, yes, have a what if plan, because it helps you get in your head, not the fear of the what if, but talking openly about, so how would we work if that happened? And how can we get calmer about those scenarios instead of under reaction? And then finally talking about taking imperfect action. The idea that, you know, operational excellence may be the goal, but taking little steps of faith is actually how we get there. So, and then I ended
Mm,
with talk about with discussion about the leader, because the leader
that's
at the
right.
end of the day makes the difference, and an adaptive leader can create an adaptive organization.
Wow, there's something that you skipped that I want you to talk about a little bit. That this idea of technical problems versus
Oh,
adaptive problem. Could you
yeah,
kind of give that contrast again? I thought that was
yeah,
good.
that was interesting because in my research I found out that I think a lot of people would say that an adaptive organization is good at problem solving, and they leave it there. But it became evident that what kind of problems do we solve? Technical problems are the ones that are pretty straightforward, that you have a problem and solutions exist out there that you can use. And the task is mapping the right solution to the right problem. And the example I give is of a tire that's flat, right? There are ways to solve that. You just got to find, you have the expertise or find the expertise, done, right? But adaptive problems are much more complex. And an organization that's good at those has a different kind of skill set. So, an adaptive problem might be, for instance, you have a quality problem that's resulting in your products being recalled, or you have a customer or employee retention problem. So, to solve that, it's not like, oh, let me just get my hammer and just fix that with one hammer. You have to actually get under it. You have to. It's typically driven by cross-functional implications. There's going to be a need for awareness and openness about where and admitting that this isn't working, and a mindset change often is required in those adaptive problems that actually force you to look at the problem differently than you might have before. So to me, that was from my in my own research, I started to realize that those leaders that actually intentionally start working on doing well at creating a community of people that don't deny these big problems, like I have a retention problem, but you actually bring it up and then explore it with a new perspective, is actually going to be a skill set for survival and for thriving in a continually adapting environment.
I love it. Good stuff. Before I go to John, who is next, Pamela said it was amazing. And Joan said it's about being nimble. That's a
Yeah,
good
right.
word for it as well.
That's a good word for it.
Now, and then John, who his assignment was to kind of talk about this entrepreneur's journey towards excellence. He's built 3 restaurants. He's got a real estate company. He's got a gym. He's got really for a telecom business,
Yeah.
and he kind of gave some really pragmatic as to how he's been to walk this journey towards excellence. One of the key points he made was this idea that he's not been able to do without a coach. I mean, this guy, he's worked in Fortune 500 companies before he was an entrepreneur. He's a trained accountant, so he's a learned man. He's has Fortune 500 experience. He knows all this best practice, but he felt coaching and having a mentor was really key to walking this out. What do you think about John stuff?
Well, he's so humble. This is John Chango. He has a street named after him in Kenya.
He does. He does. He built the whole neighborhood.
Right. So, and this is a guy with restaurants and real estate, and he has just so much going on. And his humility was really what jumped out at me. But I also thought it was interesting that he acknowledged building, having people to help guide you was important. Building a team of reliable people. He quoted Timothy 2:2, and I think it's he said, look for people who can make you better. And I thought
Mm.
that was just often we would look to someone with that kind of track record and say, you got it, you should coach others, but he's open to being coachable. I also thought it was interesting when he talked about when you build your team, he used GPS in a different
A
acronym that we
different
use.
way. That's right.
He used G, he said, build your team and seek their gifts, their G, their gifts,
Mm.
P, the passion, and as stories of your team, so that becomes part of your brand. So that when you build your team, you're acknowledging that this actually becomes who you are. I thought he was, and he again echoed what we heard from Pastor Noela, this idea that you don't do this thing alone, you do it with others.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, if you're watching or listening, you're ever in Kenya, you want to visit the Maverick restaurant, one of the best restaurants in the world, really. And he just does an amazing job there. And then we went to our good friend Andy, and
And
Andy got real pragmatic. He brought this. He took it now from the personal. It's kind of like if John dealt with the organization, you dealt with kind of how to look at it strategically. I dealt with kind of a framework, and Pastor Noela kind of dealt with, the attitude of faith. What he now said, he said, look, if you do not guard your priorities, then none of this stuff matters. And what I got from his talk was this idea of that operational excellence requires margin.
mm, that's a
And because if you don't have the margin for excellence, you're not going to be excellent. What was your thoughts?
that's a powerful way to say it. I felt very convicted by his point. The idea that I ended talking about leadership and that leaders make a difference. But if the leader who's leading others isn't clear on the big rocks, your priorities, then as he said, you're living other people's priorities.
That's right.
And he really challenged you to have a master plan, to clarify why are you here. He challenged us to say, when you get out of bed, are you quickly looking at email, which is somebody else's priorities? Are you spending time with God, which is your priority? And he also, was very, as you said, pretty practical. How does he spend his time? As first and third weeks of the month, he does for planning and more outreach, and second and fourth weeks he does client meetings. And I thought it was very, he took something, we all say we need to be more prioritized and use our time better, but he gave some very practical ways to take, as he says, Jesus's call to fulfill wasn't to fill his potential, he was called to fill his purpose. And it's a very important reminder to us that we could do a lot of things with our time. We could be very fragmented in our approach to building our businesses and our lives, but starting with your life priorities and making that the way you prioritize your time and your relationships and your and choices is very helpful and timely.
Yeah, and there's a hidden message in that statement by Jesus, because when we try to live up to our potential, we can live on the edge, right? There can almost this it become hubris or
Yeah.
this macho man idea. In other words, because we all say it, and I've said it. I mean, live up to your potential. But the danger with that idea is that just because you have the ability doesn't mean you should be doing it, right?
Which goes
But
back to this
then
margin that you're talking about. This idea.
exactly. So when you focus on purpose, then it's not about what I have the ability to do. It's about what I've been called to do. If I do what I've been called to do, then I will have the margins to do amazing things and dream big. Right? It's about energy conservation. I was thinking the other day, I learned something from my mom, and I don't think I learned it intentionally. I was exercising, and this thought, no, actually, I was exercising while listening to a book called Peak Performance.
Mhm.
And it talked about that great leaders have energy conservation techniques, right? And they kind of give their examples. And it brought me to my mom, because so one of the techniques that I do is, and people who know me know this, is that if I'm not engaged, I go to sleep.
Wow, good for you.
And so literally I could be going from, like, in between stuff, like literally from speaking engagement, I could literally take a 20-minute nap. And at first it was, and I got it from my mom, because my mom used to, she used to go from like conquering to just totally asleep. And just watching her, I've got that same thing. And what I finally realized is, and people say, Patrice, how are you so always up and always so engaged, always so high? It's really because of that energy conservation technique. So my
Mhm.
system have been trained to conserve energy when it's not needed. So as a result, when I'm on, I am full on.
You are.
Right?
I'll attest to that.
So it goes back to just because you can doesn't mean you should. And having clear boundaries in your life, starting with your schedule and so forth, allow you not only to conserve energy, but to preserve them for when it's actually needed.
Mhm.
Which ties back to experience excellence. And then Serene came in and she took it and she kind of dealt with this idea of the Holy Spirit, this idea of the supernatural, and kind of said, look, you can have all these techniques, all this stuff, but at the end of the day, if your faith is not so that you can speak words of faith, believe words of faith, um, it doesn't really matter because it's you're dead upon on arrival.
Yeah. Yeah. She started with just this idea that the kingdom is voice activated. God said, let there be light. And the voice of
That was like,
God created these powerful statements. And so, I mean, really, so if you go from just priorities to say, so what do you do with every moment? It's this idea of using your words wisely,
mm,
using your words powerfully, and starting with your call from God about your priorities, but operational excellence could even be as basic as using your words more effectively. So that was
wow,
very
that's
powerful.
incredible. Well, guys, if you missed it today, you want to join us tomorrow. There was also two breakouts. There was a breakout where you got to learn about Nehemiah Project, our products offering, got to reflect with the team to really look at your next steps. That's important. We'll have it again tomorrow. And then we all had a networking session where participants got a chance to connect with others to build relationships and community so that they can walk excellently together. So it kind of as a wrap, if you look at today, you say if there's one thing they can walk away with, Susan, what would you advise our listeners? Say, here's the one thing that you can walk away with that will be really transformative.
Well, I'd say intentionality, because
Mm.
in every single one of the conversations today, people were left with some specific actions that they can take that require them choices. Just the choice of do you build with operational excellence or don't you? Do you lead to be adaptive or don't you? Do you build with these teams, clarifying? Every single step along the way was a decision that someone would make, not casually, but with intention. And then by the power of God, being able to be pulled, the power of making intentional decisions and acting even imperfectly to accomplish them was what really I took away.
I love it. Thank you. Listen, I hope you guys enjoyed our podcast today. If you did, I want you to share it. All right, share with your friends, share with family. And by the way, follow us on Facebook, like our Facebook. Follow us on LinkedIn. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are on Instagram. Instagram. Follow us there. And we even have our own private social media platform, the e-community. If you're not a member, join us there so you can engage with over 1,500 entrepreneurs around the world. Thank you, team. That's what you said is Instagram,
Not Amsterdam.
not Amsterdam. Join us. And so if you've not yet registered for Nehemiah Week, go to our website, nehemiahweek.com. nehemiah.com. There you can register for the rest of the events. You can register for just tomorrow or whatever you like. Tomorrow we'll have our speakers again. We'll have Ann Baylor, Chuck Prophet. We'll have Scott Reiser, Anna Maria Lowry. I'll be sharing. Pastor Moore will be sharing. We're going to begin with a great worship from Parish Friends. We're going to begin also with prayer. So join us tomorrow, and then you get to network and connect with other members as well. And then Thursday, we'll have our investors forum. And then Friday, our international business plan competition. And we'll conclude Saturday with David Bennon and our state of the ministry. So register to right now and join us and be a part. With that said, I want to pray for you. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord enable you to steward those talents that are under your care, to steward them in such a way that one day you'll hear those wonderful words. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. Guess what? He'll not make you rule over much. God bless you. Have a great day and a wonderful rest of the week.
God bless you all. See you tomorrow.
Yeah.